1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, there's another one. That's your quaking or trembling aspen. And they really give themselves away when the wind blows. Those perfectly round little leaves shimmy and shake in the breeze. And that's where they get their name, quaking or trembling aspen. There you go. You got a 50-50 chance guessing on trees in this part of the park. Round leaves, aspen, droopy leaves, poplar. Conifers. You may have noticed they're pretty small, right? The needle tree is very small, very skinny looking. And the majority of these trees are black spruce. Some of them will be at an odd angle, and as you drive up and down the Alaska Highway, the Parks Highway between Anchorage and Fairbanks, you'll see some of what we call drunken forests, where these trees that can grow very easily in permafrost. If that permafrost starts to thaw, the trees will start to fall off at odd angles. So we call them drunken forests. And you'll see a little bit of that in through here. Black spruce. And when we get off the bus up at the cabin, we'll be in more of a forested area up there with white spruce in it. And white spruce they look an awful lot like these black ones, but they tend to be quite a lot bigger, especially their trunks. Their trunks will be significantly bigger in diameter. There you go. Now you guys can all go get jobs with the Forest Service. Make the big bucks. The little berries that you're seeing, yep, the powdery stuff that you see on those little tips is pollen. And those are the new growth of needles. So they start off, they poke out, they're kind of red looking, and then that red is going to turn to a kind of a brown coating, and then that'll fall off, and underneath, bright green, brand new needles. Yeah. Oh, they are edible, actually, and high in vitamin C. Yeah, you can eat them. Here's park headquarters on the left. And remember Harry Karstens from the film? First superintendent? This was the house on the right that he built. You can get a glimpse of that through the trees. That's the chief ranger's house. Pretty nice, yeah. Now we just passed through that little gate there. And that is where the road gets closed in the wintertime. So down at the base of this hill, just out of sight, that's where some pretty important park employees live, and they're instrumental in the wintertime for travel. Those are the sled dogs. So Denali National Park, the only national park that has teams of sled dogs. Go figure. And the rangers use those dogs all winter to do patrols out into the park. They try and maintain right around 30 sled dogs, which makes up about 3 dog teams. Maybe 4 if you're running a small dog team. I'm not sure of the exact number this year, but I know they had a litter of puppies, so every year they add on additional canine rangers and retire some of the older ones. What are they patrolling for? Great question. A number of things. They still are watching out for poaching. So in this 2 million acres of park that we're traveling in is a non-hunting zone. But there are hunting zones all around us. Nowadays, I like to give people the benefit of the doubt in that they're not poaching intentionally. It's more of not knowing exactly where you are. So they do catch people. They're also making sure people aren't inside the wilderness area on a snow machine, because it's a motor-free zone in the wintertime. That's one reason why they use the dogs and not snow machines. The motors out of here in the winter. They are packing supplies out to various points in the park. So in the wintertime, it's a lot easier to get around than it is in the summertime, especially if you are going to leave the road and go off into the backcountry. If you get all these brush species down under a layer of snow, it's pretty easy to ski, snowshoe, or travel via dog team out into the wilderness in the wintertime a lot easier than it is in the summer. So they use the dogs, they're packing supplies out to various cabins that are out in the park. They're helping the researchers carry gear that they may need for their studies, all kinds of stuff. And over the course of the wintertime, they put about 3 dog teams. So they're going some distance. Their traditional patrol that they do is 2 weeks. They'll leave quarters in the park, sometimes up to a month out into the park. And because our winters here, the weather can be pretty cold, they have some cabins that they use for shelter, the rangers. So what they'll do is they mush right up the center of this road for this part of the trip. And the cabin that we're going to stop at here in about half an hour or so, that's the very first place that they stop on their ranger patrol. They'll tie the dogs up to the trees outside, and the rangers can go inside, make a fire, and have a nice night inside of the cabin. The next cabin in line is about 10 to 15 miles away, which is, with the amount of light that we have in the winter, which is not much, that's about what you want to do in a day with these dogs that we have here. They're not race dogs, but they're strong and they can pull heavy weight. So throughout the park there's 5 cabins, and each of them about 10 to 15 miles apart, so they have a nice place to spend the night when they're doing ranger patrols. They'll do day trips from each cabin. Makes a lot of sense. When it's 25 below, I personally don't want to sleep in a tent. What about the dogs? Oh, those poor little doggies have to sleep outside. And they are designed for that. They've got a double layered coat. So their undercoat is this thick, woolly layer that this time of year, if you have a sled dog, is all over the floor of your house. Or all over your... So they've got that as like an insulated layer, and then they've got guard hairs, long hairs that can be 3 inches long that kind of cover up that, and that's like a windbreaker and a rain jacket. So the dogs, they're pretty comfortable outside to about 35 that range. And what they do is they haul straw, and the dogs will kind of curl up in that straw, do what dogs do, spin, 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 make a little nest. And then the sled dogs cover up their noses with their tails, and that keeps their nose warm, also preheats the air that they're breathing. So they've got it all figured out. If you bring those dogs inside, the cabins are pretty small, and you're going to have a pretty hot fire going in the wood stove in the cabin. Dogs would be way too hot in there. How do they keep their water from freezing? That's a toughie. So that's the very first thing that these rangers are going to do when they get to camp, is they're going to take the snow and they're going to melt it. And you always take care of your dog team first. So the first thing you start is to start a fire. You get the dog pot out, you start melting snow. And 7 gallons of snow equals 1 gallon of water. So it's quite a lengthy process. The dogs will drink, and then the rangers, again in the morning, will make really. So that's the first thing that they do. And the funny thing is, so as you might imagine, these cabins don't have running water inside, and so they have an outhouse. And so each cabin has a map, a snow map. And that tells you where to tie the dogs, because you don't want to be getting your drinking water from where the dogs are tied. It shows you where humans are allowed to urinate outside, and it shows you a spot where this is the spot we keep clean. This is the... They each have a little map made up for that. Kind of funny. So now what you should be looking out your windows and looking for in through this area, this is good moose habitat. And the reason it is because there's a lot of bushes here. And moose eat leaves. That's what they subsist on all summer long. And they really like the leaves of the willow bushes. So kind of these taller ones you're seeing at about 1 o'clock, just brand new fresh leaves on these taller bushes. Those are willows. And in this park, it's pretty easy to learn how to identify your tree species, but when you get into the brushy trees and brush, that's where it gets hard. There's 17 different varieties of willows, and it can be pretty difficult to tell which is which. So if you just use the generic term willow, you're okay. But the moose eat the leaves, so this is where they like to be, kind of right on the edge of the forest where there are a lot of leaves to eat. And in the wintertime, you know, when there's no leaves, the moose have a pretty rough go of it. So they tend to lose about 30% of their body weight over the course of a winter. That means in the summertime, they're obsessed with food. They've got to gain that 30% of their weight back. Then they've got to gain enough so that they can afford to lose 30% the next winter. So they're pretty obsessed with food. And we have had I'm just going to stop and let a park service vehicle go past me here. I want to go a little faster than us. We've got a researcher who's been studying the moose in Denali Park since the 1970s. His name is Vic von Ballenberg, and I only say that because it's fun to say, Vic von Ballenberg. But one year he decided he wanted to figure out how much the moose eat. Does it take for to subsist? And so he hired some research assistants, some college kids who are pretty excited to come spend the summer in Denali Park studying the moose. And they radio collared a few animals so they could track the same moose every day. They came out here, got their radio telemetry, find the moose, and then they followed it around all day. And they literally counted how many bites of food per hour the moose took. Not only did they count the bites, but they had the bites classified. Is it a small bite, just a little nibble? Is it a medium-sized bite, or is it a large bite? And then they went back and they weighed those leaves. What does a small bite weigh? What does a medium bite weigh? What does a large bite weigh? And then at the end of the season, they extrapolated all those numbers and got some statistics. Came up with about 60 pounds of leaves every day is what a moose. I don't know if you guys have ever raked up leaves in the fall. 60 pounds of leaves, that's a lot. That's a lot of leaves. So, kind of hard to imagine. Question up front about what are these big brown bulby looking things on the spruce trees, and let's see if we can find one and point it out to folks. What it is called is rust or witch's broom. There's one there on the right. See that big lump in the tree about 3 o'clock? Kind of looks like a nest a little bit, and in some cases the squirrels or the birds may turn that into a nest, but what it is a spot where the tree is being attacked, whether it be by a fungus or a bacteria, even a virus, and it causes the leaves of the tree, the branches, to grow out in a kind of a crazy pace. So if you look closely, those are all tiny, tiny, tiny little branches of the tree. Witch's broom is what it's most commonly called in most places, but for some reason here in Denali, people call it rust. Often it's kind of rusty in color in the trees. And it doesn't kill the tree, it's just kind of like having a pimple, I guess. You know, a blemish. So you see how at the top of that hill, as we crest it up and over, things look a lot different, don't they? So we're kind of on the cusp here in between the taiga or the forest and the open tundra. And so in through here, you could see, as far as animals, you can see either moose or caribou or bears. But more than likely either moose or caribou. And the moose eat leaves, so there's still quite a bit of leaves out in through here. Caribou, they like to eat moss. And so when you get out more in the open, a a lot more moss on the ground. You can see if you look kind of in the road cut that the layers of moss in some spots, a couple feet thick, really. And moss acts as an insulative barrier. So you've all probably seen cabins with moss growing on the roof, and a lot of people, when they build a log cabin, will use moss on top of their roof as insulation, right? And so in this case, it's insulating the ground, and it's helping to contribute to the permafrost that's growing underneath. So permafrost meaning the ground right under the layers of moss, maybe a couple feet down to 10 feet down, maybe even frozen all the time. And the moss is keeping the heat of the sun in the summertime from getting down through to thaw the layer, that permafrost out. That's one of the reasons why building a road in Alaska can be really challenging, because you strip that layer of moss off. You put down gravel, you put down pavement, but gravel and pavement aren't as insulative as moss is, so the permafrost underneath the road will start to thaw, and then in the winter it freezes and thaws and freezes and thaws, and all of a sudden you're driving along and whoop-de-doo. Has that happened to you? Frost heaves in the roads. That's a problem. Every spring, our roads become like roller coasters in some spots. That's a great question. Why don't they layer the moss? In some spots, they have started putting insulation under the roads, and that helps a lot. But it's expensive. They should just take the moss and they shouldn't even scrape it off. Just put the road on top. But permafrost, here we only have patches of it. So where you see areas like this, your big wide open spaces, little tiny trees where there are trees. That's because these trees can't really grow in frozen ground, that they are so small. But if you go towards Anchorage, you're going to come up and over the Alaska Range, which is the big mountain range that Denali's part of. On the south side of the Alaska Range, there's no permafrost. On the north side, there is. So we're just in the kind of transition zone here, being right at the edge of the Alaska Range. You get pockets of permafrost. If you go further north, like to Fairbanks, when you get up around Fairbanks, just about everything up there is permafrost. So we're getting pretty close yet to mountain viewing. Denali's going to show up, if it does, in about the 11 o'clock. A minute. It may or may not become visible. Come on, baby. And you all probably got the impression from that film that Denali is really the hardest thing to see when you come up here. It only shows itself to about 30% of park visitors. That 30% club. And there are clouds everywhere, but there are breaks in the clouds, so hopefully. Have any of you bought any either t-shirts or magnets that say the height of the mountain on it this year? Did anyone buy anything? No, I haven't looked yet. I'm asking because they keep changing the number. Like the last 3 years, they've changed the height of the mountain. Just the numbers stay the same, but they keep measuring it over and over again, trying to get the most accurate number. And so this year, the number that they've given us is 20,310 feet high. Last year it was 20,227, I think, and the year before it was 20,320 feet high. So I mean, it's like, come on guys, pick a number. This year 20,310, that's the number we're going to go with. They resurveyed last year using some pretty sophisticated GPS and satellite